Unemployed again, my aunt mocked. Just then, the butler walked in carrying tomorrow's Fortune magazine. On the cover, youngest tech billionaire, with my face staring back at them. This is a story about a secret I kept for 3 long years, a secret from the very people who should have been my biggest champions. And it's about the moment everything exploded, when my entire family's jaws quite literally dropped to the floor, finally seeing the truth of who I really was. If you've ever been underestimated by the people closest to you, then you know this feeling. In the Morgan household, success wasn't just a goal, it was a religion. We were the Morgans, and our currency was job titles, corner offices, and stock market dominance, not silly things like innovation or passion. Our annual summer dinner at the family estate was always the worst, a gilded cage of expectations where everyone paraded their latest corporate conquests. And me? I was usually the one getting skewered. Unemployed again, Alexandra. My Aunt Natalie's voice cut through the polite chatter that year, dripping with perfectly feigned concern. Her eyebrow, as always, was impeccably raised. She had no idea what was about to hit her. The Morgans aren't just a family, we're an institution. Morgan Financial has been a cornerstone of Wall Street since my grandfather, William, built it into a powerhouse in the 1970s. Our Connecticut estate, with its sprawling lawns and Georgian mansion, felt less like a home and more like a museum dedicated to old money and even older traditions. Growing up, my life was mapped out before I could walk: prestigious boarding school, an Ivy League education, and then, inevitably, a corner office at Morgan Financial. My parents, Judith and Frederick Morgan, were the architects of this grand plan. My mother, with her impeccable designer suits, climbed the corporate ladder while maintaining the image of the perfect Morgan wife. My father, the CEO, embodied everything the Morgan name represented: tradition, stability, an unwavering belief in the established financial system. They weren't bad people, not really. They were just products of their own environment, utterly blind to anything beyond the Morgan legacy. Alexandra has such a sharp mind for numbers, my father would tell colleagues at company events, his hand heavy on my shoulder. She'll make a fine addition to the risk assessment department once she finishes at Harvard. Never mind that I had expressed zero interest in risk assessment or even Harvard. Then there was my cousin, Stephanie, Uncle Philip's daughter. 2 years older than me, she was groomed from birth to be the next Morgan heir. While other teenagers were figuring out who they were, Stephanie was interning at Morgan Financial every summer, writing papers on market trends and networking with board members at family functions. Stephanie closed her first major client account today. Uncle Philip would announce at family dinners, beaming. Youngest account manager to do so in company history. Uncle Philip himself sat on the board with my father, brothers by blood, but fierce rivals in the boardroom. They maintained a facade of cooperation while constantly jockeying for greater influence. And he viewed me as a massive disappointment. A Morgan who didn't fit the mold. Such a shame Alexandra doesn't have Stephanie's focus, he'd say to my father, loud enough for me to hear from across the room. All that potential going to waste on computer games. My grandparents, interestingly, had slightly different takes on my quiet rebellion. Grandfather William, the company patriarch, would watch me with a strange curiosity whenever I tried explaining new technologies at family gatherings. Though he rarely intervened in my parents' plans, I sometimes caught a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. Grandmother Eleanor, however, was the epitome of proper society. Alexandra dear, she would say, gently but firmly adjusting my posture. A Morgan woman must always present herself with dignity. This fascination with electronics is unbecoming. But the most vocal critic, the one who truly dug the knife in, was always Aunt Natalie. She married into the family and overcompensated for her outsider status with a fierce, almost fanatical loyalty to Morgan traditions. She saw my interest in technology as a personal affront. Computers and gadgets, she would scoff. Just a passing trend. Real wealth is built on paper and handshakes, Alexandra, not whatever those Silicon Valley boys are playing with these days. Those annual summer dinners were pure torture. A parade of achievements where each family member was expected to report their contributions to the Morgan legacy. From my earliest memories, These dinners were exercises in humiliation for anyone who dared step outside the prescribed path. When I was 12, I proudly announced I had taught myself basic coding. How creative, Aunt Natalie had responded, her smile not reaching her eyes. But perhaps focus on your mathematics instead. Computers come and go, but financial acumen is forever. By 16, I was building simple applications and winning regional science competitions, but these accomplishments were treated as cute hobbies at best, distractions at worst. Alexandra received another award for her computer project, my mother would say with a strained smile, quickly pivoting. But she's also maintaining excellent grades in economics. The family library contained not a single book on computer science or modern technology. When I asked for coding books for Christmas, I received investment guides instead. My computer itself was contraband, purchased with babysitting money and hidden in my closet when relatives visited. The message was crystal clear. Technology was a toy, not a career. Real Morgans worked in finance, preferably at Morgan Financial. Each dinner reinforced this narrative, creating the suffocating expectation that eventually I would give up my phase and join the family business. By the time I left for college, I had learned to stay quiet about my true passions. It was easier than facing the dismissive comments and concerned glances. But inside, my resolve was only growing stronger. Stanford's computer science program was my escape. 3,000 miles from Connecticut, I could finally breathe. My parents had reluctantly agreed to Stanford only because of its prestigious business program, which they assumed I would eventually switch to after getting computers out of my system. The day I met Professor Evelyn Hayes changed everything. After her advanced algorithm design lecture, I stayed behind with questions that apparently impressed her. "You think differently, Alexandra," she said, adjusting her glasses. "Most students see algorithms as formulas to memorize. You see them as living puzzles." She became the mentor I never had, introducing me to her network of tech innovators and venture capitalists. Through her, I glimpsed a world where ideas were valued over tradition, where innovation trumped pedigree. "Your family name might open doors in finance," Evelyn told me once. "But in tech, it's what you build that matters." My first startup attempt during senior year was a spectacular failure. A peer-to-peer lending platform that collapsed under regulatory hurdles. I had been too naive, too focused on the technology without understanding the financial regulations. When I called home after the failure, Uncle Philip's voice dripped with condescension. "This is why Morgans stick to what we know, Alexandra. Come home. Take the position your father's been holding for you. No more of this Silicon Valley nonsense." The next 6 months were the darkest of my life. I moved into a tiny San Francisco apartment, barely leaving except for coffee and ramen. Depression clouded every waking moment as I questioned everything about my path. Had my family been right all along? The breakthrough came at 3 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday. I woke from a dream about my grandfather's vintage safe, the one he kept his most important documents in. In my dream, the safe was being hacked, but the alarm system was too outdated to respond properly. That's when it hit me. The financial industry was using outdated security systems to protect trillion-dollar transactions. My knowledge of both worlds, the Morgan financial legacy and cutting-edge technology, gave me a unique insight into this massive vulnerability. I spent the next week without sleep, drafting the architecture for SecureFlow, an AI-driven financial security platform that could identify fraudulent transactions in real time, adapting to new threats automatically. With renewed purpose, I assembled a team of brilliant misfits, people whose talents had been overlooked by established companies. Maria, a self-taught coding prodigy who dropped out of high school. Jackson, a cybersecurity expert whose criminal record prevented corporate employment. Devin, a UX designer whose unconventional approaches had gotten him fired from 3 major tech firms. "We're building something revolutionary," I told them. "A system that will make financial transactions safer for everyone, from Wall Street to Main Street." Working from my apartment, we created the first prototype using borrowed equipment and cloud services purchased on my nearly maxed-out credit card. All while my family believed I was just finding myself after my startup failure. Our breakthrough came when I pitched the prototype to Garrett Wright, a notoriously skeptical angel investor known for funding unconventional founders. "Your background is finance royalty," he said after my presentation. "Why are you slumming it in a studio apartment with a startup?" "Because my family represents the past," I replied. "I want to build the future." He wrote a check that same day. One strategic decision changed everything. I used A.M. Morgan as my professional identity, not to hide completely, but to ensure my work would be judged on its merits, not my family name. It also kept my family from discovering what I was building before I was ready. Our series of funding round closed at $18 million, news I couldn't share at the next family dinner where Aunt Natalie asked if I was still playing with computer games. I just smiled and changed the subject. Secure flow grew exponentially. Major banks began adopting our security protocols. The team expanded from 4 to 40, then 400. We moved from my apartment to a converted warehouse in Soma, then to a gleaming office tower in the financial district. Through it all, I maintained my privacy. Even as Secure Flow reached unicorn status, I kept a low profile, avoiding industry events and sending team members to accept awards. The few photos published showed only the back of my head or my profile in shadow. The call from Fortune magazine came 3 years after that rainy night of inspiration. The reporter had pieced together that A.M. Morgan was Alexandra Morgan of the Banking Morgans. "We want to do a cover story," she said. "The secret billionaire revolutionizing financial security." After a long pause, I made my decision. "I'll do it on one condition," I said. "Use my full name, Alexandra Morgan." It's time for the truth. The photographer captured me standing in our office, the San Francisco skyline behind me, wearing jeans and a simple black turtleneck rather than the Morgan-approved designer suit. The headline they chose was perfect. Alexandra Morgan, youngest billionaire, revolutionizing financial tech. The issue would hit newsstands the day after our annual family dinner. I drove my modest electric car through the imposing wrought iron gates of the Morgan estate, past the freshly manicured lawns and the fountain centerpiece that had been photographed for countless financial magazines. The mansion loomed ahead, Georgian architecture, 22 rooms, and enough family history to fill a museum. Jenkins, our family butler for over 30 years, greeted me at the door with the same formal nod he'd given me since childhood. "Miss Alexandra," he said, taking my light jacket. "The family is gathered in the east drawing room." I smoothed my simple navy dress, expensive but intentionally understated, and took a deep breath. The double doors to the drawing room might as well have been the gates to an arena. "Alexandra, darling." My mother rushed forward, her diamond earrings catching the light from the crystal chandelier. Her embrace was genuine but brief, a very Morgan greeting. "We were beginning to think you'd missed dinner entirely." My father nodded from his position by the fireplace, tumbler of scotch in hand. "Traffic from the city?" he asked, assuming I still lived in my tiny Connecticut apartment rather than across the country. "Something like that," I answered vaguely. Uncle Philip didn't bother with pleasantries. "Heard anything from that headhunter I sent your way?" "Gregory Stevens, top fellow, places candidates with all the best firms." "I've been busy with other projects," I replied. "Projects don't pay the bills," he countered with a dismissive wave. "Unless they've started paying for playing on computers these days." My cousin Stephanie approached, radiating confidence in her tailored Chanel suit, her diamond engagement ring prominently displayed. She air-kissed both my cheeks. "Alexandra, it's been ages. I've missed you at the industry mixers." Her smile tightened at the corners. "I've just been made Senior Vice President of Client Relations, youngest in Morgan history." "Congratulations," I said, genuinely happy for her despite our complicated relationship. "Stephanie closed the Peterson account last quarter," Uncle Philip announced to the room. $15 million in new investments. That's carrying on the Morgan tradition." My grandmother approached slowly, leaning on her ebony cane. Her pearl necklace and perfectly styled silver hair were as much a part of her as her piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. "Alexandra," she said, her voice soft but carrying an undercurrent of disappointment. "Still pursuing your interests?" "Yes, grandmother." "Still in technology?" Her slight frown spoke volumes as she patted my hand and moved toward her favorite armchair. My grandfather nodded at me from across the room, a slight twinkle in his eye, the only break in his stoic demeanor. Jenkins announced dinner precisely at 8 o'clock, and we processed into the formal dining room. The mahogany table gleamed under the antique chandelier, set with the family's Wedgwood china and sterling silver flatware that had been a wedding gift to my great-grandparents. I took my assigned seat, the same place I'd sat since graduating college, between grandmother and cousin Stephanie, the perfect position to feel inadequate from both generations. The market's been particularly favorable to traditional investment strategies this quarter. My father began as Jenkins served the soup course. The tech bubble is showing signs of strain, as expected. Those Silicon Valley types are finally learning the lesson of sustainable business models, Uncle Philip added, looking pointedly in my direction. All flash and disruption, with nothing substantial underneath. I sipped my water, choosing silence over confrontation. Alexandra, my mother interjected with forced brightness. Tell everyone about what you've been doing lately. All eyes turned to me. This was the moment in every family dinner I dreaded, the spotlight on the Morgan who wasn't meeting expectations. I've been working on financial technology solutions, I said carefully. Still with that little startup that failed? Aunt Natalie asked, her voice dripping with false concern. No, I've moved on to other ventures. Which company? Uncle Philip pressed. Anyone we would know? It's still in development, I deflected. Stephanie jumped in with practiced smoothness. The innovation department at Morgan Financial is actually exploring some interesting technological applications. Nothing too disruptive, of course, just enhancing our traditional services. That's the sensible approach, Aunt Natalie nodded approvingly. Use technology as a tool, not a replacement for proven methods. The conversation shifted to Stephanie's recent industry recognition and my cousin David's new position at Goldman Sachs. I focused on my perfectly prepared duck confit, nodding at appropriate intervals. Alexandra was always so bright, my mother said during a lull. She just needs to find her footing. At 28, I had already managed my first fund, Uncle Philip reminded everyone. It's about focus and commitment to excellence. Different times, Philip, my grandfather said quietly. Different world now. Some things don't change, Aunt Natalie countered. The principles of success remain constant. Hard work, connections, proper positioning in established industries. As Jenkins cleared the main course plates, Aunt Natalie turned her full attention to me. Her diamond bracelet clinked against her wine glass as she leaned forward. Unemployed again, she asked with mock concern. At your age, I was already on the board of 2 companies and had organized the Morgan Foundation Gala 3 years running. The table fell silent, waiting for my response. This was the moment that had played out countless times throughout my life, the public reminder of my failure to meet Morgan standards. I took a careful breath. I wouldn't exactly say unemployed. Oh, Aunt Natalie raised a perfectly penciled eyebrow. Then what exactly would you call it? Freelancing, consulting, or is it still the computer hobby? Before I could answer, Jenkins entered the dining room with unusual timing. He never interrupted the main dinner conversation. In his white-gloved hands was a silver mail tray. Pardon the interruption, he said formally, but Mr. Morgan's advanced copy of tomorrow's Fortune magazine has arrived. He specifically asks to see financial publications as soon as they're delivered. My heart stopped. The timing couldn't be more perfect or terrifying. 3 years of secrets were about to be exposed in the most dramatic way possible. Jenkins approached my father with the silver tray, the glossy cover of Fortune magazine facing down as was customary. My father barely glanced up as he took it, still mid-sentence about quarterly projections. Thank you, Jenkins. As I was saying, the conservative approach has once again proven. He flipped the magazine over and froze. The words died in his throat as he stared at the cover. The silence extended for 1 second, then 2, becoming increasingly noticeable until the entire table turned to look at him. Frederick, my mother questioned. Is everything all right? My father's face had drained of color. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but no words came out. Instead, he slowly turned the magazine around for everyone to see. There I was, standing confidently in front of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking San Francisco Bay, arms crossed, wearing my signature black turtleneck and a subtle smile. Above my image, the bold headline proclaimed, "Alexandra Morgan, youngest billionaire, revolutionizing financial tech." The silence around the table was absolute. Not even the clink of silverware broke the sudden vacuum of sound. My mother's water glass slipped from her fingers, spilling across the white tablecloth, but drawing no reaction. Uncle Philip reached for the magazine with trembling fingers. This must be. He couldn't complete the sentence as his eyes darted between the cover and my face. Cousin Stephanie leaned over his shoulder, her complexion paling to match the tablecloth. "Secure flow," she whispered. "Am Morgan?" "The Am Morgan." My grandmother's teacup clattered against its saucer. "Alexandra, explain this immediately." Aunt Natalie's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For once in her life, she was completely speechless. My father finally found his voice. "Is this some kind of joke? Some mock-up you've created?" I took a deep breath. After 3 years of hiding, of deflecting questions and enduring condescension, the moment had arrived. Not as I'd planned, but perhaps exactly as it needed to. "It's real," I said, my voice steady. "The magazine hits newsstands tomorrow. Secure Flow is my company. I founded it 3 years ago." "Secure Flow?" my father repeated. "The security system that First National just implemented across all their branches?" "That's Secure Flow," I nodded. "Along with 17 other major financial institutions, including 3 international banks. We're currently valued at just over $4 billion. My mother's hand flew to her pearl necklace. "4 billion? And you own it?" Uncle Philip asked incredulously. "All of it. I maintain majority ownership," I explained. 63%, to be exact. The rest is held by our early investors and employee stock options. Grandmother Eleanor pressed a hand to her heart. "You're telling us you've been building a technology empire while we thought you were unemployed?" "Yes. But why the secrecy?" my mother asked, hurt evident in her voice. "Why not tell your own family?" I looked around the table at the faces that had shaped my life, the same faces that had dismissed my passion as a hobby, my ambition as a phase, my vision as a fantasy. "Would you have understood? Would you have supported me?" I asked quietly. "Or would you have told me, as you always have, that technology is just a trend, that real success comes from following the Morgan path?" No one answered. The truth hung in the air between us. Suddenly, Grandfather William let out a deep, rumbling laugh that startled everyone. It built from a chuckle to a full-bodied roar that made the crystal glasses vibrate. "Magnificent," he declared, slapping the table. "Absolutely magnificent. A Morgan through and through, but on your own terms." He raised his wine glass toward me. To Alexandra, who understood that tradition without innovation is just stagnation. The silence broke like a dam. Everyone began speaking at once, questions tumbling over each other. "How did you start? When did you? Why didn't you? How much is the company?" I held up a hand, and to my surprise, they fell silent. Something had shifted. The family power dynamic had irrevocably changed. "I'm happy to explain everything," I said. "But first, I want to be clear about something. I didn't build Secure Flow to prove you wrong or to earn your approval. I built it because I believed in the vision, because it was what I was meant to create." My father nodded slowly, a complex mixture of pride, confusion, and regret crossing his features. "We have a lot to talk about." "Yes," I agreed. "We certainly do." Dinner was forgotten. Jenkins discreetly directed the staff to clear the barely touched desserts as my family moved en masse to the grand living room, the Fortune magazine passing from hand to hand like a sacred artifact. "It says here you developed a proprietary algorithm that can detect fraudulent transactions with 99.8% accuracy." Uncle Philip read aloud, his voice tinged with disbelief. "That's unprecedented in the industry. The core technology uses a neural network that learns from patterns across millions of transactions," I explained. "Traditional security systems are rule-based, which makes them vulnerable to new types of attacks. Ours evolves constantly." My father paced by the fireplace, occasionally stopping to glance at me with new eyes. You understand what this means for the industry, don't you? This could completely transform how financial institutions approach security. That's the idea, I said. That's always been the idea. I always knew you had potential. Uncle Philip declared, conveniently forgetting years of dismissive comments. Morgans have business in their blood after all. Though I must say, technology wasn't where I expected you to apply it. I couldn't help but smile at the revisionist history unfolding before me. Really? That's not how I remember our conversations about my career choices. He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Well, perhaps I was traditional in my thinking. Cousin Stephanie sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa, her expression a complex mixture of emotions. So, when we spoke last Christmas and I was telling you all about my promotion, you were the founder and CEO of SecureFlow. I confirmed gently. Her face flushed. I must have sounded so small-minded. You sounded passionate about your work, I corrected her. There's nothing wrong with that. My mother sat beside me, occasionally touching my arm as if to confirm I was real. I don't understand why you couldn't tell us, Alexandra. We're your family. Would you have understood, Mom? Be honest. 3 years ago, if I'd said I was turning down the Morgan financial position to start a tech company in San Francisco, what would you have said? She looked down at her hands. I would have thought you were making a mistake. You all would have, I said, looking around the room. And you would have tried to talk me out of it, worn me down, made me doubt myself. I needed to do this on my own terms. But we could have helped you, my father insisted. Provided connections, capital. I didn't want Morgan connections or Morgan capital, I interrupted. I wanted to succeed or fail based on my own merit, not my last name. A silence fell over the room as they absorbed this concept, so foreign to the Morgan way of doing things. Aunt Natalie, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. Well, I've always said Alexandra had a unique way of looking at things. Her attempt to align herself with my success was so transparent, I almost laughed. Have you? I asked innocently. I seem to recall you saying my computer hobby was a waste of time that would never amount to anything. Her smile tightened. You must have misunderstood, dear. I was merely concerned that you find a proper application for your talents. I decided not to press the point. Her hasty recalibration of our relationship spoke volumes. My grandmother approached slowly, her eyes examining me as if seeing me for the first time. I would very much like to see this office of yours someday, Alexandra, to understand what you've built. The request surprised me. I'd like that, grandmother. Around me, family members were pulling out their phones, searching for SecureFlow online. Their expressions changed as they discovered articles, valuations, and industry awards I'd never mentioned. You were named Technology Innovator of the Year last fall, my cousin David exclaimed. There was a ceremony and everything. I sent my CTO to accept, I explained. I wasn't ready to go public then. Your company's valuation is. Uncle Philip stared at his phone in disbelief. This can't be accurate. For $200 million. At our last funding round, I confirmed, though that's likely to increase after tomorrow's article. My father collapsed into his favorite leather chair. My daughter is a billionaire, he said to no one in particular. A billionaire who I've been pestering to take an entry-level position at Morgan Financial. Jenkins, who had entered silently with a tray of brandy, cleared his throat. If I may, Miss Alexandra, I found your company's quarterly reports most impressive. The growth curve is extraordinary, especially in the European markets. All eyes turned to him in shock. You knew? My mother asked. Jenkins straightened primly. I subscribe to several technology newsletters, madam. They've been featuring SecureFlow for some time now. The leadership profile of A.M. Morgan did bear a striking resemblance to Miss Alexandra, though the photos were always quite artfully obscured. I couldn't help but laugh. Thank you for your discretion, Jenkins. He inclined his head slightly. Not my secret to tell, Miss Alexandra. As Jenkins distributed the brandy, the questions became more pointed. Why go public now? My father asked. Why reveal yourself at all? It was becoming too difficult to maintain the separation, I explained. And I realized that hiding my identity was starting to hold the company back. We're preparing for an IPO next year, and transparency will be crucial for investor confidence. An IPO? Uncle Philip's eyes gleamed with sudden interest. Well, naturally, Morgan Financial should handle the underwriting. I can put you in touch with our best team immediately. And there it was, the attempt to co-opt my success, to bring it under the Morgan umbrella. I had been waiting for it. Thank you for the offer, Uncle Philip, but we've already engaged Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan Chase as our underwriters. The paperwork was finalized last month. His face fell. But we're family. Surely you'd want to keep this within the Morgan empire. Secure Flow isn't part of the Morgan empire, I said firmly. It never has been, and it never will be. It's its own entity. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees as the implications of my statement sank in. Alexandra, my father began carefully. You must understand how this looks. A Morgan building a financial empire outside the family business. I do understand how it looks, I replied. It looks like I followed my own path and succeeded. As the evening wore on, family members gradually dispersed to process the revelation in their own ways. Around midnight, only my father remained in his study, nursing a glass of scotch and staring into the fireplace. I knocked softly on the open door. May I come in? He looked up, his expression unreadable. Of course. I settled into the leather chair opposite his. The room smelled of cedar, leather, and tradition, the same scent I remembered from childhood when I'd been summoned here for various disappointments or expectations. You're angry, I observed. He swirled his scotch, watching the amber liquid catch the firelight. Not angry. Perhaps wounded. 3 years, Alexandra. 3 years of building something extraordinary, and you didn't trust us enough to share it. It wasn't about trust, I said softly. It was about space. I needed room to fail or succeed without the weight of the Morgan expectations. We only wanted what was best for you. You wanted what you thought was best for me, I corrected. There's a difference. He considered this, then nodded slowly. Fair enough. But I still don't understand why technology of all things. The Morgan legacy is in finance. That's just it, Dad. The future of finance is technology. The institutions that don't adapt will become obsolete. I saw that coming years ago, but none of you would listen. He flinched slightly at the truth of it. We've been in business for 4 generations. That breeds a certain resistance to change. I know, I said. That's why I had to go my own way. Morgan Financial views technology as a tool. I see it as the foundation. My father leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I'm afraid, Alexandra. I've been afraid for years watching these tech companies disrupt industries that have stood for centuries. Banking, investments, insurance, they're all being transformed, and I've been holding on to the wheel of a ship that might already be sinking. His vulnerability shocked me. Frederick Morgan had always been a pillar of confidence and authority. It's not sinking, I assured him. It's evolving, and it needs to evolve faster. Secure Flow isn't a replacement for traditional financial institutions. It's protection for them. Our technology makes banks more secure, transactions more reliable. So, you're not trying to make Morgan Financial obsolete, he asked with a hint of a smile. I'm trying to make sure it has a future, I replied. The financial world still needs the expertise and relationships that firms like yours provide, but they need to be built on a technological foundation that can withstand modern threats. He nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps it's time I learned more about this foundation. A soft knock interrupted us as my mother appeared in the doorway, her usual perfect composure slightly frayed. May I join you? She asked hesitantly. I nodded and she sat on the arm of my father's chair, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Alexandra, I owe you an apology, she said directly. I should have supported your interests instead of trying to redirect them. I was so focused on what a Morgan life should look like that I missed what you were trying to build. Thank you, Mom, I said, genuinely touched. That means a lot. I'd like to understand your work, she continued, truly understand it, not just nod and change the subject as I've done for years. Our conversation extended into the early morning hours, with my parents asking increasingly thoughtful questions about Secure Flow's technology and my vision for the future. For the first time, I felt they were seeing me not as a Morgan who had strayed from the path, but as Alexandra, who had forged her own. The next day brought a succession of one-on-one conversations with family members, each revealing different capacities for growth and understanding. Cousin Stephanie found me on the terrace after breakfast, 2 cups of coffee in hand. She offered one wordlessly, then leaned against the stone balustrade beside me. "I've been jealous of you," she admitted after a long silence. "All these years I thought you were drifting while I was achieving. Now I realize you were flying while I was crawling." "That's not true," I countered. "You've accomplished exactly what you set out to do. You're brilliant at what you do, Stephanie. The fact that I chose a different path doesn't diminish your success." She smiled sadly. "But my path was pre-drawn. Yours was courage. Pure courage." It was also terrifying and lonely, I admitted. There were so many times I wanted to call you, to ask for advice or just vent, but I couldn't without revealing everything. "You can call me now," she said, meeting my eyes. "Anytime. No competition, no judgment, just cousins." Uncle Philip's approach was predictably transactional. He cornered me in the library with a proposal for a strategic partnership between Morgan Financial and SecureFlow, complete with detailed projections. "We could create a specialized security division under the Morgan umbrella," he explained eagerly. "Your technology, our client base, it's the perfect synergy." I closed the folder without looking at the numbers. "I appreciate the offer, Uncle Philip, but SecureFlow remains independent. We're happy to have Morgan Financial as a client, but not as a parent company." His smile tightened. "You're making a mistake. You need our established reputation in the financial sector." "Our reputation is doing just fine," I replied evenly. "But thank you for the concern." Aunt Natalie made several attempts to rewrite our history, each more transparent than the last. "I always told your mother you had a special spark," she insisted over lunch. "Something different from the usual Morgan ambition. I saw it even when you were small." Rather than confronting her directly, I simply asked, "What specifically about my interest in technology did you find promising, Aunt Natalie?" "I'd love to hear what stood out to you." Her momentary fluster was answer enough. The most surprising conversation came from my grandfather, who asked me to walk with him through the gardens. At 84, he moved slowly but purposefully along the gravel paths. "Did I ever tell you about my first venture?" he asked suddenly. "Morgan Financial, the expansion from Grandfather Jacob's brokerage." He chuckled. "No, before that. When I was 22, I tried to start an automated stock ticker service using the earliest computers to track market movements and generate alerts. I stopped in my tracks. You never mentioned anything about computers." "Because it failed spectacularly," he said with a wry smile. "The technology wasn't ready, and neither was the market. My father called it a foolish distraction and brought me into the family business. Eventually, I built Morgan Financial into what it is today." "Do you regret giving up on your original idea?" I asked. He considered this, his eyes distant. "I regret not trusting my instincts about where the future was headed. The concept was sound, just premature." He turned to me, his gaze sharp, despite his age. "I've been following your progress." "You have? How?" "I may be old, Alexandra, but I'm not ignorant. I've had my assistant print out articles about SecureFlow since your first funding round. Your pseudonym wasn't particularly cryptic to someone who's known you since birth." I was stunned. "You knew all this time? Why didn't you say anything?" "Because you needed to do it yourself," he said simply. "Some paths can only be walked alone, at least at first." He patted my hand. "I'm proud of you, not just for your success, but for your courage to break the mold. The Morgan legacy isn't about banking. It's about building something that lasts. You've done that, just differently than the rest of us." That evening, I made my decision. "I'd like to invite all of you to visit SecureFlow headquarters next month," I announced at dinner. "See what we're building, meet the team, understand the technology." "I'd like that very much," my father said, with murmurs of agreement around the table. "But I need to be clear about something," I continued. "This isn't an invitation to absorb SecureFlow into Morgan Financial. It's an opportunity for understanding, maybe even collaboration between equals, but not acquisition or control." My father nodded slowly. "Understood. We come as family, not financiers." "Well, perhaps a bit of both," Uncle Philip couldn't help adding, earning him a sharp look from my grandmother. We come as learners, she corrected firmly. It's time the Morgans caught up with the future. As I looked around the table at faces that had judged, dismissed, and underestimated me for years, now showing various degrees of respect and curiosity, I realized that success hadn't changed me nearly as much as it had changed them. Their perception had transformed, while my essence had remained consistent all along. I had wanted their approval for so long, only to discover that what I really needed was my own confidence, something I built alongside SecureFlow, brick by brick, code by code. 6 months after the Fortune magazine revelation, I hosted the Morgan family's first ever West Coast dinner at my San Francisco penthouse. The space couldn't have been more different from the Connecticut estate, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, modern furnishings, and not a piece of inherited furniture in sight. As my family arrived, I observed the subtle changes in our dynamics. My father and grandfather immediately gravitated toward the window to discuss the city's skyline and real estate potential, common ground they could share. My mother and grandmother admired the contemporary art collection, asking thoughtful questions about the local artists I supported. Even Uncle Philip had moderated his approach, though he couldn't resist mentioning potential synergies between our companies at least once an hour. SecureFlow's European expansion is moving faster than projected, I explained as we sat down to dinner, a casual farm-to-table experience rather than the formal service they were accustomed to. We've opened offices in London, Berlin, and Stockholm in the last quarter. The Frankfurt Banking Consortium signed on last week, my COO, Lauren, added. I'd invited my executive team to join us, breaking another Morgan tradition of family-only dinners. Your security protocol prevented 3 major hack attempts on First National last month, my father noted. Their board chair couldn't stop singing your praises at the industry conference. The system works, I said simply. That's what matters. The conversation flowed with surprising ease between tech discussions and family stories, business projections, and personal updates. The rigid boundaries of Morgan dinner conversation had softened, allowing for a blend of professional and personal that felt natural. After dinner, cousin Stephanie joined me on the balcony, both of us watching the fog roll in beneath the Golden Gate Bridge. I've been thinking about your approach, she said thoughtfully. The way you built something completely new instead of trying to change the existing structure, and I'm launching an innovation division within Morgan Financial, she announced. Father finally approved it last week. We'll focus on integrating emerging technologies into our traditional services. I smiled. That's fantastic, Stephanie, genuinely. It's small compared to what you've built, she said with a self-deprecating laugh. It's not about size, I countered. It's about impact. You're changing Morgan Financial from within, which might be even harder than what I did. Back inside, I found my parents and grandparents examining the digital wall, displaying SecureFlow's global security monitoring. A real-time visualization of our system protecting financial transactions worldwide. It's beautiful, my mother said softly. Like a constellation of safety. That's exactly how I see it, I replied, surprised by her perception. My grandmother took my hand. I was wrong, Alexandra. We were all wrong to try to force you into the traditional Morgan mold. Sometimes the greatest respect for legacy is to reimagine it. Over the past 6 months, the partnership between Morgan Financial and SecureFlow had evolved into something I hadn't anticipated. A genuine collaboration that benefited both companies. My father had embraced the technological transformation with unexpected enthusiasm, becoming an advocate for digital security within the traditional banking community. The Morgan name now represented both tradition and innovation, established practice and cutting-edge technology, a bridge between financial worlds that others were rushing to cross. Not every relationship had healed completely. Aunt Natalie still made occasional comments about lucky timing or riding the tech wave, unable to fully acknowledge that my success came from vision and persistence rather than fortunate circumstances. Some wounds were too deep, some patterns too ingrained to change entirely. But I had learned to accept this imperfect reconciliation. I no longer needed universal approval from my family, a freedom more valuable than any business success. As the evening wound down, my grandfather asked for everyone's attention, raising his glass in a toast. To Alexandra, he began, who taught this old financial family the most valuable lesson of all, that innovation without tradition may be brilliant, but tradition without innovation is doomed. You've honored the Morgan legacy by redefining it. Later that night, after everyone had left, I stood alone at the window, reflecting on the journey. 3 years of secrecy, of building something revolutionary while being dismissed by those whose approval I had once desperately sought. The vindication had been sweet, but the true victory wasn't in proving them wrong. It was in discovering I hadn't needed their validation after all. The next morning, I woke to news alerts about the latest Fortune issue. On the cover was a photograph of both Morgan Enterprises, the classical columns of Morgan Financial Headquarters in Connecticut, and the sleek glass tower of Secure Flow in San Francisco, with the headline, "Tradition Meets Innovation. The Morgan Legacy Evolves." The article detailed our partnership and the broader implications for the financial industry, how established institutions and technological disruptors could collaborate rather than compete, creating stronger systems together than either could build alone. I thought about all the other young innovators facing family expectations, cultural pressures, and institutional resistance. Brilliant minds with visions that others couldn't yet see. My journey from dismissed dreamer to industry leader could serve as a roadmap for them, proof that perseverance and belief in one's vision could overcome even the most entrenched skepticism. Success wasn't measured by wealth or recognition, though those were satisfying validations. True success came from authenticity, building something that reflected your unique perspective and contributed genuine value to the world. The Morgan legacy would continue not as a rigid tradition passed unchanged through generations, but as an evolving entity adapting to new realities while maintaining core values of excellence and innovation. I had found my place within that legacy, not by conforming to its established boundaries, but by expanding them to include new possibilities. So, what's your story of being underestimated? Have you ever proven someone wrong who didn't believe in you? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that the most important validation comes from within. Remember, sometimes the people closest to us are the last to recognize our potential, but that doesn't make it any less real. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.